Keir Starmer built his entire reputation on being the UK's top prosecutor, a man of law and order. He sold himself as the serious, credible adult in the room, the one you could trust with the nation's secrets. But what if that entire image was a carefully constructed lie? Katie Hopkins just went live with receipts that threatened to tear it all down, exposing a dark history Starmer has spent years trying to bury. The story starts with his 5-year tenure as the Director of Public Prosecutions, or DPP, from 2008 to 2013. This was the job that made him Sir Keir and launched his political career. He repeatedly claimed he took full responsibility for every decision made under his leadership. Yet, when the tough questions come, a very different story emerges. A story of incompetence, shocking failures, and secrets hidden in plain sight. The most damning allegation revolves around one of the UK's most monstrous predators, Jimmy Savile. For years, rumors swirled about why Savile was never prosecuted despite numerous complaints. In 2009, under Starmer's leadership, the Crown Prosecution Service, or CPS, formally decided to drop a case against him. When the scandal exploded into public view, Starmer's defense was simple. He claimed he didn't know. But that's where the story gets murky. As the head of the entire CPS, how could he be unaware of a case involving one of the most famous figures in the country? According to insiders, the first time they saw Starmer truly angry was when he commissioned an internal report into the Savile failings, furious because he did not know. Yet that very excuse is what Hopkins and other critics have torn apart. It's either a confession of staggering incompetence or a convenient lie to save his own skin. The official line is that there is no evidence Starmer had a personal role in the decision. Even former Prime Minister Boris Johnson had to walk back his direct accusation that Starmer personally failed to prosecute Savile. However, the charge that sticks isn't about one man's signature on a document. It's about the culture of an organization that he was legally in charge of, an organization that catastrophically failed to bring a monster to justice on his watch. He can't have it both ways, taking credit for the wins while pleading ignorance on the failures. You have to understand the scale of this failure. The CPS had evidence. They had victims willing to speak, but they made a decision that protecting the establishment was more important than protecting children. Starmer was the man in charge of that establishment. His job, his only job, was to prosecute criminals. And when faced with one of the most prolific offenders in British history, his organization looked the other way. His excuse that he was too busy, too important, to know about the Savile case is an insult to every single victim. It's the ultimate political cop-out. And the Savile case was just the tip of the iceberg. Starmer's time as DPP was littered with questionable outcomes. His critics point to the handling of grooming gang cases, where a 2009 decision not to prosecute suspects in Rochdale over concerns about a victim's credibility became a massive scandal. Starmer has since defended his record, claiming he changed guidance to challenge the very stereotypes that prevented victims from being heard. But the numbers tell a different story. Under his leadership, a shocking 63,000 cases collapsed due to CPS incompetence, according to a 2012 inspectorate report. Let that number sink in. 63,000 times, a victim was let down. 63,000 times, a potential criminal walked free not because they were innocent, but because the department led by Keir Starmer failed to do its job properly. Another analysis found his department was wasting an estimated £25 million a year on abandoned cases. This is the record he built his career on, a legacy of dropped cases, catastrophic failures, and a convenient lack of memory when things went wrong. Hopkins hammered this point home, arguing that Starmer's tough-on-crime persona is nothing more than a performance. She describes his leadership as a political shrug in a suit, all talk and no action. This isn't just a political disagreement. It's an accusation that the very foundation of his public image is fraudulent. He sells stability, but his record shows chaos. He talks about justice, but his legacy is defined by justice being denied. The pattern of deflection became even clearer when Starmer was asked about his record in a 2024 interview. He tried to downplay the failures, saying, "We had 7,000 staff. We made nearly 1 million decisions a year. Will there be mistakes there? Of course, there will." This was a stunning reversal from his earlier claims of taking full responsibility. Suddenly, it was the fault of his 7,000 staff, not the man at the top. This is a classic move from a leader who doesn't want to lead. When the good news hits, the spotlight is on him. When the bad news breaks, he points to the faceless bureaucracy. he was supposed to be in charge of. This is the core of the hypocrisy Hopkins exposed. Starmer craves the authority, but rejects the accountability. He wants the credit for prosecuting members of parliament in the expensive scandal and for bringing Stephen Lawrence's murderers to justice. He will stand in front of any camera and take a bow for those victories. But when it comes to Seville, grooming gangs, or mass case collapses, he shifts the blame to the massive organization beneath him. A true leader takes the blame and gives the credit. Starmer does the exact opposite. The questions about Starmer's past have become so potent that they have followed him all the way to the Prime Minister's office. As Prime Minister, his every move is now viewed through this lens of suspicion. Hopkins has directly attacked his recent policy decisions, framing them as a continuation of the same weak and dishonest leadership style. She has slammed his warnings that things will get worse before they get better as a pathetic excuse for a broken promise not to raise taxes. It's the same pattern: make a bold claim, and then when reality hits, find an excuse. In one scathing rant, Hopkins claimed Starmer was creating a massive financial hole by caving to union demands, only to later tax homeowners to fill the gap. This, she argues, is the real Keir Starmer, a man who says one thing to get elected, then does another once he has power. It's a direct echo of his time at the CPS, present one image to the public while the documents tell a different story. He promises fiscal responsibility, but spends recklessly. He promises no new taxes, but raises them anyway. The disconnect between his words and his actions is the defining feature of his entire career. But just when you think the pattern of incompetence and deflection is the whole story, a new receipt emerges. A receipt that recontextualizes everything and suggests something far more sinister than just poor management. And it all comes down to the destruction of evidence. It was revealed that the CPS has deleted all records of Keir Starmer's 4 official trips to Washington, D.C. while he was DPP. These trips, which cost the taxpayer over £21,000, occurred between 2009 and 2013, the exact period when the CPS was handling the highly sensitive extradition case of Julian Assange. Let's break that down. In November of 2011, U.S. records that weren't destroyed show Starmer met with the U.S. Attorney General and a host of American and British national security officials. The British delegation he led included the UK's liaison prosecutor to the US, a key figure in extradition matters. The topic of conversation was almost certainly Julian Assange. Yet, when reporters filed Freedom of Information requests for details about these meetings, for agendas, for minutes, for emails, the CPS responded that all records had been destroyed. The organization has also admitted to destroying key emails related to the Assange case from the same period. This isn't just poor record keeping, it's a cover-up. This isn't a misplaced file. This is the systematic, deliberate destruction of public records concerning high-level international meetings about one of the most controversial legal cases of the century. Why were the records of these specific high-stakes meetings in Washington erased? What was discussed about the Assange case behind closed doors with U.S. intelligence officials? Who gave the order to press delete? The destruction of these documents prevents the public from ever knowing the full truth. It feeds the narrative that Starmer operates in the shadows, making deals and decisions that can't withstand public scrutiny. This act of destroying public records is the ultimate receipt. It proves a pattern of hiding the truth when it becomes inconvenient. It's one thing to claim you weren't aware of the Seville decision. It's another to have the records of your own international meetings systematically wiped from existence. This revelation gives weight to every other accusation of dishonesty and deflection. It transforms him from a potentially incompetent manager into someone who actively conceals his own actions from the public he's supposed to serve. The public reaction to all of this has been simmering for years, and now it's boiling over. Starmer has faced death threats and required police protection after being mobbed by protesters shouting about Jimmy Seville. A YouGov poll found that while most people didn't believe the claims he was personally responsible, a significant 1 in 5 Britons still thought it was probably true. The damage to his reputation is real and lasting because it strikes at the very heart of his political identity, trustworthiness. Katie Hopkins has become the lightning rod for this public anger, channeling the frustration of millions who feel they've been deceived. She calls Starmer Slippery Starmer and Keir Stasi, painting him as an authoritarian fraud who talks about transparency while hiding his own past. She has accused him of the political corruption of the justice system and of being deeply complicit in scandals to protect his own career. Her language is brutal, but but it resonates with a public that is tired of being lied to. Her attacks are relentless and personal. She has mocked his mincing little photo op on VE Day and blasted his foreign policy, accusing him of recklessly pushing for British troops on the ground in Ukraine. She claims his entire political persona is a carefully managed performance, comparing his speeches to a memoir in monotone and his charisma to a wilting lettuce leaf. She argues that there is nothing authentic about him, that every word is poll-tested and every gesture is rehearsed to project an image of a man that his own record proves he is not. The legal and career fallout is now impossible to ignore. Every time an opponent wants to question his judgment, they bring up his record as DPP. It's his Achilles heel. They attack him for being soft on crime, while he was simultaneously overseeing a system that let predators walk free and botched thousands of prosecutions. The man who built his brand on the law is now haunted by it. His greatest strength has become his greatest weakness, because the receipts are all there in the public domain. Starmer's team has tried to do damage control, claiming these are just old smears being recycled by his opponents. But the facts remain. The Seville case was dropped on his watch. 63,000 cases collapsed on his watch. The records of his trips to Washington were destroyed on his watch. These are not smears. They are documented failures of leadership and transparency. They are indelible stains on his record that no amount of political spin can wash away. Katie Hopkins didn't create these facts. She simply refuses to let the public forget them. She argues that Starmer's entire career is built on a foundation of sand. A man who claims to be a steady hand but whose record shows incompetence. A man who preaches accountability for others but deflects blame for himself. A man who calls for openness but whose own history is riddled with destroyed documents and convenient memory loss. The more you scrutinize the man behind the carefully crafted image, the more the entire facade crumbles. The story of Keir Starmer is a classic tale of power and hypocrisy. He aimed to use his powerful position as the nation's top prosecutor to build a political dynasty. He presented himself as the incorruptible hero who would clean up politics and restore order. But as Hopkins has brutally exposed, the villain in this story was the rot happening inside his own organization under his own leadership. Starmer aimed to destroy his political opponents with his reputation for legal brilliance, but ultimately, it's his own buried record that has come back to destroy him.